Hey, aloha everyone. So in this lecture, we're going to learn about another neurotransmitter called norepinephrine. Now, in this lecture, I'm just going to talk more about the nervous system effects. I mean, we'll have to talk about systemic effects as well in other bodies or other parts of the body, but in this one, we'll focus on nervous system. All right, so norepinephrine, and another name for it is noradrenaline. So I think noradrenaline and adrenaline, there's something called epinephrine, and which is the same thing as adrenaline. But norepinephrine is the same thing as noradrenaline. I think noradrenaline is favored by Commonwealth countries like the UK, Australia, maybe Canada. I have to double check on that. But either way, they're the same thing. Now, norepinephrine is made from tyrosine, and in fact, there's an intermediate step. Like there's multiple enzymes that make are needed to make norepinephrine from tyrosine, but this is also why there's very similar effects to dopamine because dopamine is actually the norepinephrine is made from dopamine, but enzymes come in and kind of change the chemical structure that makes norepinephrine as a product. Now, in terms of like it's in, and this is why it's useful to know that norepinephrine is also called noradrenaline, because norepinephrine targets adrenergic receptors. So adrenergic comes from the adrenaline, uh, this terminology right here, this root word. So there's like two broad categories, alpha adrenergic and beta adrenergic, and there's like subreceptors, like there's alpha 1 and alpha 2, but we'll get to that when we talk about the autonomic nervous system. Basically, norepinephrine targets adrenergic receptors in the nervous system. Now, how do you turn norepinephrine off when you don't need it? So it can be degraded by enzymes or reuptake into the original presynaptic cell that secreted the norepinephrine. Now, what does norepinephrine do? So norepinephrine is very important in your sympathetic nervous system, which we'll cover in another lecture more in detail. But it's very important that fight or flight response and these adrenergic receptors. So when someone says like, "I feel the adrenaline rush," that is their fight or flight response. So that is, if you've heard like, so this is like when you encounter a very stressful or intense situation. This is why your heart might beat faster. It might feel its pound. You might feel more awake and alert and more tense and anxious. That is your fight or flight response, and a lot of norepinephrine running through your brain, and also epinephrine running through your system as well. Both norepinephrine, epinephrine, I should say. So arousal in terms of like being like very woken up and very just like very alert, and so this is what's happening. So it's not like relax time, it's go time when you're aroused. And then here's the attention and alertness of fight or flight. You don't want to fall asleep during this situation. You want to be on it. Now the thing is that norepinephrine is also very important in cognitive function because you don't want to be slow in thought if you're encountering a very stressful situation you might have to fight or fly from or flee from. So the thing is that you want that brain to be running at like full speed. Now there's other effects as well. So the fight or flight, this is why you feel your heart beat faster because this is another effects of norepinephrine and epinephrine on the heart. And also increased breathing rate. So you're going to breathe faster because again, you're going to be using up a lot of energy for whatever this response and situation is. So it makes sense you want to get more oxygen and get rid of more carbon dioxide. And you're going to be burning up a lot of energy. So say you're doing the flight, you're fleeing, well, you're going to be running, you're going to be gobbling up a lot of energy, so your body compensates and tries to do that by releasing more nutrients into your bloodstream and also enabling your body to use those to generate more energy so you can deal with whatever that stressful situation is. And so like yeah, so this is a stressful situation, and why I bring up this movie because like what's something there's something that this is not baking powder, it's a natural product. So this is cocaine. It's a natural product and it's made from the coca leaves, and the indigenous people who discovered that they actually didn't, well, they didn't do the purified form, but they ate these leaves. And because why? The cocaine is a stimulant, and so it also helps with altitude sickness as well, with the low oxygen at those high altitudes in the Andes. So what we see is like this, how does it work? So is it just like, so what it does is it blocks the reuptake of multiple neurotransmitters. Reuptake is your one way of getting rid of, or I should say eliminating neurotransmitters from a synapse by just taking it from the synapse, hoovering up and getting it vacuumed back into the original presynaptic neuron so that you turn off that neurotransmitter signal. But the cool thing about cocaine is that I'm not advocating the use of it for recreationally, but this is how it works. It blocks reuptake of serotonin, it blocks reuptake of dopamine, blocks reuptake of norepinephrine. So what's the end of effect? You prolong the effects of all three of these neurotransmitters in the brain. So serotonin, like mood. So you prolong the mood, prolong that kind of mood that benefits and increase in mood. And then dopamine, pleasure and the attention. This is going to increase that as well. Norepinephrine is going to increase all that, like that the fight or flight response and the alertness and arousal. So this is why people get amped up, and like colloquially they call like uppers and downers. This is why cocaine's the upper, because it makes people feel good. It increases attention, but and also increases alertness. But the thing is that it could also lead to addiction. Now, to be appropriate on a more so a more because I think, and actually like in Coca-Cola, they used to have cocaine as a stimulant, but they replaced it with a different drug. They replaced it with caffeine because again, cocaine is illicit, at least if you're in the US. Now, bupropion is something that is prescribed, and these are the trade names like Wellbutrin, Zyban, but what it is NDRI, so it blocks the reuptake of norepinephrine and dopamine. So the dopamine again, very important in like reward, attention, learning, movement, and also pleasure. And norepinephrine also is important in learning, or not learning, actually to an extent, but it's also important in attention as well. So what it does is basically blocks those reuptake so that norepinephrine and dopamine, it's a double whammy. They stay longer in these synapses. So the cool thing is that it's used for smoking cessation. So basically quitting smoking, or is quitting, like say someone has uses another like vaping or other things like some substance use disorder, they with or I should say tobacco use disorder, they can be profiled like this. So instead of like getting their dopamine from smoking, they're getting it from just their dopamine staying in their system for longer. Also in depression, because again, dopamine very good in pleasure, and norepinephrine is going to kind of increase alertness and arousal, so not so much like slowing things down, but actually speeding things up. So you kind of get an energy boost and you get a pleasure boost as well. So sometimes they might be prescribed for that. See, and other psychiatric disorders as well. So the thing is that tachycardia, insomnia, agitation, sweating, dry mouth, tremor, these are all part of your natural part of your fight or flight system. So if your fight or flight system stays on too long or too strong, they can cause all of these. Tachycardia is just a medical term for fast heart rate. And insomnia, you can't sleep. Agitation, you're kind of nervous and you're kind of irritable. Sweating, so obvious, and dry mouth and tremor, these are all classic parts of the things that naturally occur when you have the fight or flight response. Okay, so that was like your introduction to norepinephrine and the sympathetic and nervous system, but we'll cover the sympathetic nervous system much more in detail in another lecture.